Good morning. I'd like to talk about a couple books that I think would be great for teaching a unit about class and socioeconomics. These books work well together because they're presentable, they're easy to access, and the ideas will come to students pretty readily. So I'll begin with The Whipping Boy. The Whipping Boy is a particularly good book because it talks about how class gives certain people impunity while others have to bear the brunt of it. You've got Jimmy, who's the whipping boy for the prince, and he has to take all the punishments of the prince. But what's interesting that happens is students will recognize how unfair and unjust that is based just on class. Just because he is a lower born child, Jimmy has to endure a lot of these punishments. But there seems to be a huge socioeconomic change that happens when they are both kidnapped, both Prince Horace and Jimmy. When they're kidnapped, it's very interesting to see how the kidnappers assume that Jimmy is the prince because he's actually literate. Because literacy is often assumed to be something that the most educated and the wealthiest people in a country would have. So to have this very contradictory idea starts to dismantle our conceptions about socioeconomics, and gets kids to start thinking about the power in, even though, for example, they may be of a lower economic status, the power of their education can provide a lot for them, as Jimmy can manipulate a lot of the situations and actually helps them in their crisis of being kidnapped because of his education. So I think this is why this is a very valuable book. Um, there are pictures that help illustrate some of the chapters. I can give kids some of the insight to what they can expect. It's a fairly fast read and gives a very good, pretty standard, but still pretty elaborate idea about what it means to deal with socioeconomics. The second book is House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer. This does not have such pictures, but it does have a family map in it so that kids can keep track of what's being talked about. This book is particularly more interesting because this is particularly interesting because it's a higher level book. It takes this discussion of socioeconomics and class to a higher level. It's also very fascinating because it adds a sci-fi element, a science fiction element, so that kids can have their imagination wander. Like, what does it mean to deal with clones and this idea of cloning, while also thinking of very real elements. For example, Matt is discriminated against and put at a lower level because of the fact that he's a clone and is not a real human being. That already creates a large class division between himself and the family of the man that he was cloned from, El Patron. It's also interesting to think about the other actors in this book. You have the Egypts, who are illegal immigrants that were captured and are turned into zombies. So you have these lower class people that are enslaved to help the country of opium. That is the large focus of this particular book. I also value the fact that when Matt runs away, because even though he was treated as a lesser individual in his own household, he still had a lot of the benefits that are provided to the aristocracy. So that when he runs away actually from the land of opium into what used to be Mexico, a lot of the people look down at him as sort of stuck up and with aristocratic means. So it shows you the difficulty in class, that even when there's divides between the rich and the sort of rich and the people that have been raised in a sort of environment that could be conceived as aristocratic, there's still these huge divides. So I like how both these books shake up our conceptions about socioeconomics, and it works very well to get to kids discussing class, how class can change, and what it really means to to be poor or rich in any type of place.